Last video, we ran the cost per horsepower numbers on 5 forgotten 1960s machines, and the math broke the market open. But horsepower is a vanity metric. It's work over time, a high RPM calculation that looks impressive on a spec sheet and feels great at a dyno shop. Torque is different. Torque is the raw mechanical force that physically moves you. It's what you feel at 2,800 RPM when the light goes green and the seat back finds your spine. And when you price it out, dollar for dollar, foot-pound for foot-pound, the cars that won the horsepower video start to slip, and the ones the market forgot start to look like a structural loophole hiding in plain sight. Horsepower builds hype. Torque builds value. Here's the proof. We're running the same 5 cars from the CPH video through a new metric, cost per foot-pound. Same current market prices, same factory gross ratings from the 1960s. The only thing that changes is the denominator. And when that denominator swells past 400, 430, 470 foot-pounds of torque, the leaderboard flips completely. The Nova drops, the Oldsmobile wins, and the GTO looks like the most expensive twist you've ever paid for. The CPFP metric. The benchmark stays the same, the 1965 Pontiac GTO. In the horsepower video, the GTO's $65,000 market price worked out to $194.02 per horsepower. On the torque table, it's a different number but the same story. The 389 cubic inch V8 produces 431 foot-pounds of torque at the factory gross rating. At today's $65,000 market price, you are paying $150.81 for every single foot-pound of twist. That is the hype tax in its purest mechanical form. You are not paying for the torque, you are paying for the nameplate, the history, the poster on the wall of every gearhead who grew up in the 60s. The GTO earns that premium in every other dimension, but on a pure cost per foot-pound basis, it is the most expensive shove on this list by a significant margin. Everything that follows is cheaper. Some of it is dramatically cheaper. One note before the leaderboard. Every torque figure here uses the factory gross rating from the original era, the same methodology we used for horsepower. Conservative numbers only. We are not inflating figures to make the math more dramatic. The math is already dramatic enough. The torque leaderboard. The small block realignment. 1968 Chevrolet Nova L79 327. In the horsepower video, the L79 Nova was the sleeper of the spreadsheet. Its power-to-weight ratio rescued it from the bottom of the CPH rankings. On the torque table, there is no rescue. The L79 327 produces 350 foot-pounds of torque, and we are using the conservative factory figure deliberately. At $34,500 in today's market, that puts the CPFP at $98.57. The Nova just crossed into the luxury bracket of this metric. You are paying nearly double the rate of the big blocks below it for a small block's effort. That is not an insult to the L79. It is a scalpel, precise, rev-happy, alive at the top of the tachometer. But if what you want is the sensation of being physically shoved through an intersection, this is an expensive way to get there. Small blocks breathe. Big blocks shove. The numbers reflect exactly that. The B-body arbitrage. 1967 Plymouth Belvedere II 383. This is where the leaderboard gets serious. The Mopar 383 Commando produces 425 foot-pounds of torque. The Belvedere II currently trades at $19,500. That puts the CPFP at $45.88. And that number deserves a full stop. You are within 6 units of the GTO's torque output. You are paying $45.88 per foot-pound versus the GTO's $150.81. That is true market arbitrage. Same B-body platform as the Roadrunner, same 383 Commando engine, none of the hype tax, none of the collector premium, all of the mechanical reality. If there is a smarter way to buy Mopar muscle right now, it does not exist on this list. The FE Powerhouse. 1966 Ford Fairlane 500 S-Code. The Fairlane won the horsepower video. On the torque table, it slips to third, not because it got worse, but because the displacement above it gets serious. The 390 FE produces 427 foot-pounds of torque. At a $22,000 buy-in, the CPFP lands at $51.52. That is still well inside the efficiency gap, dramatically below the GTO, dramatically below the Nova. Ford designed the FE family to move heavy iron, and the torque curve reflects that intention. Low, broad, and available exactly where you need it on the street. Third place on this list is not a consolation prize. It just means two engines hit harder per dollar. The Fairlane is still a loophole. The loophole above it is just wider. The Wide Track Hammer. 1966 Pontiac Catalina 2+2 421. The 421 cubic inch V8 in 4-barrel configuration produces 459 foot-pounds of torque. At the Catalina 2+2's current market price of $32,000, the CPFP comes out to $69.72. The collector interest in the 421 pushes the price above the Fairlane and the Belvedere, but the sheer volume of torque it generates absorbs that premium. Consider what that number actually means in context. You are buying more torque per dollar in a full-size Pontiac than you are in a small-block Nova. 100 additional foot-pounds of twist for less money per unit. The 421 is the investment-grade entry on the torque table for the same reason it was on the horsepower table. You are paying for the hardware, and the hardware justifies it. The Torque King. 1965 Oldsmobile Jetstar I 425 Starfire. 470 foot-pounds of torque. That is the number. That is the win. The Olds 425 Starfire V8 is the highest torque engine on this entire list, tucked into a full-size body that the collector market walked past for 60 years. At $21,500, the CPFP is $45.74, 1 cent cheaper per foot-pound than the Belvedere, and the highest raw torque output of any car in this series. The Jetstar I does not need to scream. It does not need high RPM to make its point. At 2,800 RPM, it is already done with the conversation. The market missed it because it was a full-size Oldsmobile, because it didn't have a cartoon mascot or a factory racing program. That oversight is now your opportunity. This is a displacement loophole that has not been closed, and at $21,500, it remains one of the most mechanically efficient purchases available in the entire classic car market. A 2025 performance truck can match these torque numbers. Some of them exceed 470 foot-pounds from the factory. They also weigh over 5,000 pounds, cost $90,000, and depreciate the moment they leave the lot. These 1960s big blocks represent the purest torque-to-weight-to-dollar ratio in the history of the internal combustion engine. That ratio does not exist in a new vehicle at any price point. The physics of the bargain. Here is why the leaderboard flips between this video and this one. The show crowd values horsepower. It reads well on a plaque. It wins arguments at cruise nights. But horsepower is a peak RPM measurement. It tells you what the engine can do at its absolute limit, not what it does every single time you pull away from a light. Torque is what happens below 3,000 RPM. It is the force available during every real-world driving situation you will ever encounter. And the engines that produce it in the largest volumes are almost always the ones that were installed in full-size platforms, not the muscle cars, not the performance packages, the family sedans, and the mid-size workhorses that nobody put on a poster. The 383 Commando and the Olds 425 Starfire were not built for the racetrack. They were built for low-end authority, the kind of torque that makes a 4,000-pound car feel responsive without working hard. The market's indifference to the platforms they came in is the entire reason the efficiency gap exists. The engine does not know what body it is bolted into. The price tag does. Why it matters. Run both videos back to back, and a pattern emerges. The same cars that offered the best cost per horsepower value are largely the same cars that offer the best cost per foot-pound value. The Fairlane, the Belvedere, the Jetstar, they appear on both leaderboards for the same reason. The market priced the badge, not the engine, and because the badge carried no premium, the engine came along for almost nothing. What these two metrics together tell you is this: there is a category of 1960s American iron where you are buying genuine, documented, factory-rated performance in both the peak power and the low-end torque sense at prices that have not kept pace with what that performance actually represents. That window is not permanent. Collector awareness moves slowly until it doesn't. The Belvedere II at $19,500 is the 1990 Chevelle story waiting to happen. The only difference is you have the data in front of you right now. 2 videos, 2 metrics, 1 conclusion. The efficiency gap is real, it is documented, and it is sitting in classifieds right now waiting for someone paying attention. The horsepower number got you to a lot. The torque number tells you what the car actually feels like. The next question is how you find one that hasn't been wrecked, numbers swapped, or rebuilt with the wrong parts, and what to look for before you hand anyone a check. That is the next video.